When someone reaches a unique level of greatness, it is seldom that he has the merit to have offspring that rival or exceed his greatness. But in the 1800s in Baghdad, at the time when Torah learning flourished there, even beyond that of the Holy Land, there was a prominent teacher by the name of Chacham Eliyahu Chaim, who was one of the most revered scholars in his community. Despite coming from a family of great material wealth, he was a generous man and utterly devoted to fulfilling the Torah and serving the people. Despite being childless for many years, he was eventually blessed with a son, followed by a daughter and 4 more sons. After his passing, all the Jewish businesses of the city of Baghdad closed for the entire week. This occurred when his eldest son was 26 years old, and after his passing, the community worried over who would replace such a righteous man. For 6 days after his burial, some of the greatest Chachamim of Baghdad eulogized him with stirring shiurim, but on the 7th day, his eldest son, Yosef Chaim, stood up and gave a eulogy that was so powerful that it shocked the entire community of elderly Chachamim, even the great Chacham Abdul Samak, who was his mentor, and they immediately wanted to appoint him as their chief rabbi. In years later, Chacham Abdul Samak, who started as his teacher, would actually stand whenever his student Yosef Chaim entered the room. Although he had the position of leadership laid out before him, Yosef Chaim never accepted any official position in any community throughout his entire life. His public teachings were so awe-inspiring that thousands would gather to hear him speak with no microphone or voice amplification, and yet everyone heard him speak perfectly. Join me now as we look at the life and teachings of Chacham Yosef Chaim, otherwise known as the Ben Ish Chai. Yosef Chaim was born in 1832, which was the year 5592 from creation, on the 27th day of Av, although some sources have his birth date at 1833 and 1835. He was born into a long line of rabbinic figures renowned for their spiritual influence not just on the Jewish community in Baghdad, but the whole Sephardic and Ashkenazi world at the time. In that era, even the rabbis residing in Israel would seek halakhic answers from the Jews living in Baghdad. Yosef Chaim passed away in 1909, which is the year 5670, on the 13th day of Elul. His father, Chacham Eliyahu Chaim, the son of Chacham Moshe Chaim, was the head rabbi and the leader of the entire Baghdad community. The title Chacham means wise one, the traditional Sephardic title bestowed upon rabbis, and the title was appended to Yosef Chaim's name. This title was given to the Babylonian Jewish scholars, and even today, people who are considered a Chacham must have a thorough knowledge of the Gemara and be able to answer any question by recounting the relevant explanation from its wisdom from memory. At the age of 7, Yosef Chaim fell into a deep pit in the courtyard of his home while playing with his sister. He was eventually saved by a miracle, and in gratitude to Hashem, he decided to devote his entire life to the study of Torah. As a young boy, he spent many hours absorbing Torah from the books in his father's extensive library. He went on to attend Beit Zelka, a Jewish seminary of Baghdad, headed by the aforementioned Rabbi Abdullah Samak. Yosef Chaim became known as the Ben Ish Chai, after the famous sefer that he wrote, which means son of a living man. But according to Targum Yonatan, its deeper meaning is one who was fearful of sin. The sage known as the Abarbanel interprets its meaning as if referring to his father being so righteous that even when he had passed, it was considered as if he was still alive. The work itself, delving mainly into halakhic observance, was so influential that it became a standard reference in Sephardi homes, functioning as a Sephardic Kitzur Shulchan Aruch, that is the code of Jewish law, and is widely studied in Sephardic yeshivot even to this very day. He had a great love for the Jewish people that came across in his halakot and his teaching. At times he would defend some customs that were questioned by some other chachamim because the customs themselves were not harmful and were popular among the common people. He was very much a people person, showing similar traits to Aaron HaKohen himself, and he was a huge lover of the land of Yisrael, especially Yerushalayim, similar to Moshe Rabbeinu, who pleaded with Hashem to enter into the land. The Ben Ish Chai toiled in Torah, praying constantly and fixing his midot, that is his character. The actual word midot means measure, and it refers to bringing the right measure of thinking and ethical behavior to any given situation that comes our way. As is commonplace amongst Kabbalists of his time, he spent much time practicing the denial of physical pleasure. He taught consistently for 3 hours every Shabbat for 50 years straight. There is an interesting story in which the great Kabbalist Rabbi Eliyahu Mani, when he saw the Ben Ish Chai on one occasion and was astonished to see the holy figure of his friend with the fierce and sharp mind surrounded by many devoted students. After some greetings were exchanged, he asked, "In what merit did you get all this?" And the Ben Ish Chai replied, "I denied myself all forms of pleasure that I could think of. During summer, as you know, it is customary for us Jews in Baghdad to bury our watermelons in the sand so they stay cool and tasty, and even that I denied myself." It is very important to note that the negation of pleasure is one of the ideas most misunderstood or neglected in Halakha. True holy people go out of their way to deny or at least minimize any of their physical pleasures, and that is why they are able to break their desire for physicality. In turn, this allows them to receive more and more Torah, and the body also actually feels tangibly lighter, suited for Avodat Hashem, that is the service of Hashem. There is even a type of fast which people can do called the Fast of Ra'avad, which is named after Rabbi Avraham ben David. It consists of leaving a portion of the meal uneaten. When a person can subdue his desire for the last bite of something that he loves, then that act in itself is considered a form of fasting and is very beloved by Hashem and can bring great spiritual benefits. Those who knew the Ben Ish Chai were acquainted with his miracles, which had become commonplace. His prayers never returned empty-handed, and his amulets were sure to bring a much-needed salvation to anybody he made them for. It was related that even the Arabs would close their stores in the local bazaar and bow down to the Ben Ish Chai when he passed by. After his passing, it was then that the Arabs began to really harass the Jews, leading to the mass exodus of Jews from Iran that occurred in the 19th century. There was one time when the Jews of Baghdad needed to buy lettuce for Pesach. One of the rulings of the Ben Ish Chai was that it was preferable to eat the stems of the lettuce and not waste too much time inspecting the vegetable. Knowing that the Hag was approaching, the Arabs colluded to sell lettuce at 10 times the normal price. The rich Jews had no problem purchasing it, but the poorer ones had no other choice but to turn to the Ben Ish Chai. Without wasting a moment, the Ben Ish Chai went to one of the Arab merchants, and a small crowd gathered around him, and he held aloft one of the lettuce heads in his hand and asked, "Is this worth 20 coins? Everybody looked on in silence. Immediately bugs began to crawl out of the lettuce head and spread out. The Ben Ish Chai then took another lettuce head and he asked the same question. Again the miracle occurred. Bugs began to crawl out of the lettuce. The miracle kept happening a few more times until the whole store was filled with bugs, and the Arabs agreed to supply the Jews with lettuce free of charge. He wrote many books, printing the majority of them in Yerushalayim, and some of his works were actually destroyed en route to the Holy Land by some wicked Arabs, intercepting some manuscripts during their delivery to the printing press. Each manuscript that he wrote and sent came by Ottoman mail and took 40 days by camel to arrive in Yerushalayim. At age 10, after studying for many years in his father's library, the Ben Ish Chai studied with his uncle David Chaim ben Meir, who later founded the Shoshanim La David Yeshiva in Yerushalayim, and in 1851 he married Raquel, the niece of Abdul Samad, his prime mentor, with whom he had a daughter and 2 sons. Yosef Chaim was known for the attention he showered upon his children, teaching them Torah and conversing with them despite his demanding schedule. He often composed riddles and puzzles to entertain them, some of which were recorded in his book Imre Binah. Traditionally, the eligible age for leadership within a Jewish community was the age of 30, but despite his youth, the Jews of Baghdad accepted him to fill his father's place as the leading rabbinic scholar of Baghdad. Though, as mentioned earlier, he never fulfilled the position officially, but nonetheless he was seen by the people and the elders as their leader, a post he occupied for 50 years without receiving any salary or reward. Like David HaMelech, he would rise every midnight to recite Tikkun Katzot, lamenting the destruction of the Holy Temple, and at sunrise he would recite the morning prayers. For 6 consecutive years, he fasted by day and ate only at night, to weaken his physical drives that could otherwise interfere with his divine service. He even built a mikveh, that is a ritual bath in his home, so he could purify himself at any time. Every night after Havdalah, he would ascend the attic of his home and seclude himself for hours and hours immersed in deep Torah study. And it was widely whispered that if anyone had the chutzpah to sneak up the stairs and burst in without knocking, they would behold the form of Eliyahu Hanavi studying with Yosef Chaim himself. One night, a student took up the challenge, only to be met halfway along the stairs by the Ben Ish Chai as if he knew he was coming. He continued in this manner of study year after year, striving towards spiritual perfection, studying the Torah day and night. He clashed with the reformist Bavarian Jewish scholar Jacob Obermeyer, who lived in Baghdad from 1869 to 1880. Obermeyer wanted to introduce damaging leniencies into Orthodox observance, which was swiftly opposed by Yosef Chaim and all the leading Chachamim of Baghdad. This led to Obermeyer's excommunication, which was followed shortly after with the death of his mother. It was said that during his mourning, he could not even muster 10 Jewish men to sit with him until he renounced his criticism of the Ben Ish Chai's condemnation of his proposals. He was so highly respected in his early years that one of his disciples, Rabbi David Kai HaKohen, testified that if Rabbi Yosef Chaim had lived during the time of the Beit HaMikdash, it would never have been destroyed. But unlike then, when the Jews disregarded the admonition of the prophets, the entire Baghdad community lovingly obeyed every word uttered by Rabbi Yosef Chaim. During his lifetime, nearly all the Jews of Baghdad observed Shabbat and kept Torah law. While refusing any type of salary-free service, the Ben Ish Chai instead supported his family by partnering with his brother's business. He personally funded the publishing of his own books, refusing the potentially bad influence of sponsorship or any type of charity, and any profit from these books would be distributed to the poor. He was also known to donate his books for free to Torah scholars. He attempted to bridge the gap between the Sephardi and Ashkenazi communities, who often followed widely different practices, by referring to his contemporaries abroad and reflecting on their approaches in his own writings. He felt strongly that Torah scholars needed to show mutual recognition for one another, even when they disagreed, lest their names be forgotten with the passage of time. Yosef Chaim understood that a cut and dry Torah law would not appeal to many, so the bulk of his discourses were coupled with Kabbalah and Agedah. He helped his followers make strong associations between biblical law and the law itself, so their hearts would be drawn to the wisdom of the Torah and they would remember it. His seminal work, the Ben Ish Chai, is based on the 3-hour classes he presented each Shabbat. He would begin each lecture with a Kabbalistic interpretation in simple language of the Torah portion of the week, and this grabbed everybody's attention, and then present a selection of related practical laws. It is important to establish that two really influential and important figures guided his work all along. They were none other than Rabbi Shimon ben Yoki, the author of the Zohar, and Rabbi Isaac Luria, otherwise known as the Arazal. His approach was based on the preservation of local traditions, even in halakhic rulings, but he would not recommend a change in a local tradition unless there was a compelling reason to do so. His rulings testified to his innovative approach to Ashkenazi and Sephardi rulings alike. Many stories testify to his greatness. On one occasion, a scholar from Baghdad visited a great rabbi in Yerushalayim, Rabbi Yaakov Shaul Alisha, to request his blessings. The elderly sage responded, "Why have you come to me? We have Kokam Yosef Chaim in Baghdad. There is none like him in the world." On the 8th of Elul, Kokam Yosef Chaim went on a pilgrimage to the grave of the prophet Yecheskel, that is Ezekiel, and he became sick shortly after. And on the 13th of Elul 1909, he died and was buried that same night. He was deeply mourned, and his funeral was attended by over 10,000 people, Jews and non-Jews alike. Years after his death, Jews still make it a practice to visit his gravesite every Friday. Despite his passing over 100 years ago, his legacy is very much alive in the hearts of those who continue to live by his seminal work, the Ben Ish Chai. Many of his disciples became great Jewish scholars in their own right and continued to disperse his teachings. Many schools, particularly in Israel, have been built in his name. Literally thousands continue to glean from the wisdom of Kokam Yosef Chaim, studying his books, but more importantly, living by them. Thank you so much for joining me on another long overdue episode of Insight into the Jewish Sages. Bye for now. If you like the content of this channel, get a hold of this book. It is literally jam-packed with information you will not find in most Torah publications. Its pages include topics like the fable of the money-hungry Jew, the lie that propelled the Holocaust, the real root of anti-Semitism, rightly dividing Mashiach, which contains startling truths about the Messiah you will not read anywhere else, Judaism in the New Testament, updated information about the creation of the Golem and the false Messiah, the commandment to wage war, the truth about the Shield of David, a compendium of all the false teachings in the Messianic movement, movement to help you navigate what is truth, biblical capital punishment, and why you should be frightened of sinning, the significance of the land of Yisrael, the obligations of the student, the eye in the triangle, sanctified sex, how to think like a Jew, and much, much more. There is also an updated chapter 1, and along with all the other chapters, has hundreds of footnotes and references. This is a book that took 10 years to research and compile, and will be a welcome addition to the library of any discerning student of Torah and Mashiach. Get it today on Amazon and other online bookstores. Bye for now.